So, welcome everyone. Well done for finding the right room, being here at the right time. I think I'm very much looking forward to this panel. I'm just getting used to hearing my voice through the microphone, so forgive me for that. I want to start this time together by introducing two Gestalt therapists who don't really need any introduction. These are two really well-known women who have contributed enormously to the development of Gestalt theory and Gestalt practice. It's very exciting to be here in a dialogue with Ruella from New York, and Margherita, who's on her home turf here. Both these women are directors of institutes. Ruella is the director of the Center for Somatic Studies in New York, and Margherita is the director of the Institute. I can't say it in Italian, but the HCC.
Istituto di Gestalt.
I said that. And what's very interesting about this session is that both Margherita and Ruella have they teach, they've published, and are in an ongoing process developing their thinking about developmental theory. This is a very interesting part of Gestalt that's arguably underdeveloped. But what each of these presenters are bringing is a snapshot, really, of some of their central thinking about their models of developmental theory. And they're going to present very briefly, and bearing in mind that they run whole courses and have written whole books about this, but they're going to present in a nutshell some of the central tenets of their thinking about developmental thinking in Gestalt theory. And they're going to present it in relation to clinical work. They're going to present one after the other. And then it's going to be open to all of us to engage with them in dialogue. And it would be great if you think, as they present, think about how this relates to your practice, to your clinical experience, so that we can have a discussion that's rooted in practice, and that we can think about how what they're bringing, which are very distinctive approaches, how we can integrate what we can take from that, and how we can clarify and understand what they're saying. Okay? Does that sound plan? So, without taking up any more time, I'm going to hand over to Ruella.
Thank you. I feel like on your mark, get set, go. I have 20 minutes. I don't usually read from a paper, but I'm not always linear, so I may refer to the paper, so I do this in 20 minutes. Thank you all for coming. I will talk as slowly as possible and with great appreciation that not everyone speaks English as a first language. I work with human movement, and I've been interested in human movement all my life, as you have. I'm interested in bringing movement and the dynamics of movement into the therapy session, because I think it elucidates so clearly the existential issue that is right there, ready to emerge. I've studied movement and movement processes in the infant and the parent dyad, because I think there's something so valuable to be learned when you're observing the infant and the parent in creative adjusting. Every movement has a meaning at that level. A wave of the fingers, a push up, a glance of the eyes on both parts. There is a functional similarity between the development in the first year of life and through movement to the here and now of the adult and psychotherapist session. So the more I know about what's happening in the infant and parent dyad, I learned something about the adult session. The more I know about what's happening in the adult session, I also know something more about the infant and the parent session. I guess I'm not using my papers. That was too boring. To understand this more fully, I've created a nonverbal vocabulary. And based on my studies with Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen, if anyone knows that, in the 70s, I studied with Laura Pearls in the 80s, Esther Thalin, her work in the 90s, and Alan Fogel greatly influenced me. I have created these 6 fundamental movements, and we will have handouts after, or I'll give you my email and I can hand them to you because we couldn't quite organize them to be here. Each movement has a psychological function. I'll tell you the movements. It's yielding with, or allowing to be with. And if you can imagine the mother holding the baby, the father holding the baby in his arms, and the baby giving the weight of his own body to the mother, and the mother supporting that weight. If you sit back on your chair and you feel the back of your chair support you, and feel it under your pelvis and your feet on the floor, if you really lend yourself to that experience, you will take a breath. That is allowing to be with. And it allows me to be with you when I do that, and you to be with me in a different way. The next fundamental movement is pushing against. So if the baby in the parent's arms starts to move, can you move in your chairs a little bit, one to the other? You cannot move from one place to another without pushing against. Pushing against is separating from while including the other. Can you see that these 2 patterns together form the aspects of contacting, the sensory motor support for contacting, allowing to be with, being with, and separating from while including. You might say, as my friend Dan Bloom talks about, this is being in contact, this merging with, and making contact. Every movement following this is reaching for, grasping onto, pulling toward, and releasing from. This is the wave of contacting. So the beginning, and these fundamental movements are supports for the sequences of contacting. For contacting, contacting, final contacting, post-contacting. Yielding, pushing, reaching, grasping, pulling, releasing. I'm going to talk about 2 patterns and read a case story now. The 2 patterns of yielding with, allowing to be with, and pushing against. Let this just drift over you like the fog on the London Heath, and you'll absorb what you can and let the rest go. Anything making sense so far? Yes. Okay. So this is my work with a family. And a colleague of mine had been seeing this child, Bobby, in her private practice. She's a child psychotherapist. And after meeting the parents, she thought we would do family therapy together. He came because he was very, very anxious. He was not doing well in school, and he was very disruptive at home. I'm not going to describe his particular movement style every one of you has a particular movement signature. But I will say, looking at yielding and pushing, that the whole family had a very high intensity push. I heard it in their voice, how they talked with one another. It was very abrupt, and it was in their gestures, and I felt it in the experience. These are movements of the field. I can see them in the body. I can see them in my own body. I can feel them in the relational field. You can feel the difference when I go like this and when I go like this. So this family went like this. After seeing them for several times, I decided to break them down. I would see the mother and Bobby and the father and Bobby. So when the mother first got to session, scusi, it's a lot to do to move and have this and have this. As happened in the family sessions, Bobby's sitting there like this, and the mother is talking to me and saying, he was very disruptive. He doesn't go to bed at night. He doesn't turn off his computer. Bobby's parents sleep in this room here, then there's a long hall, and Bobby in his room. So at night, they shout to one another, turn off your computer. You said I had 5 minutes. You already used that 5 minutes. No, you said, but I'm doing something, but I have to. You can understand. If you've seen families, this is very familiar. So mother is explaining this to me, Bobby's sitting like this, and all of a sudden he pops up and says, that's not the way it was. Yes, it was. No, you said, and the same thing happens. So I suggest, this is very familiar. Let's try something different. So I invite them to take a large 50-centimeter red ball and put it between them, and I'm explaining this to them, and put their hands like this, each one on the ball, and to slow themselves down as best they can and try to feel the other one through their hands. This is different for the family. And they're taking on the challenge, and they start very subtly finding the other. And I'm sitting there breathing easily and curious, and they're doing something completely different. And then, I do it better than you. You do it better than me. So they're going on. And I say to them, you found your push. You do this all the time. Bobby says, I do it because she does it. Mother says, no, he does it first. And then finally mother goes, no, I don't. And Bobby, that's the end of the experiment. So I say, okay, you know how to do this. But what was different when they were doing it? It was a game. They knew what they were doing, they recognized it, but they were having fun. And I had not seen them smiling and laughing with one another. I say, let's try something different. I invite Mommy to stand as she was in front of Bob and to take her hand as slowly as she can and extend it, palm up. And I say to Bobby, would you feel comfortable? Thank you. Can you do this? That's the mother. Then I say to Bobby, when you feel ready, take your hand and put it on Mommy's. And here they stay. And I'm watching and I'm breathing and I'm astonished. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds. And then I look at Bobby and his shoulders are down. And I feel the floor more clearly as he's breathing more deeply. He starts to get tears in his eyes, and he looks up and says to Mother, I really like that you're holding my hand. Bobby's looking at the hands, Mommy's looking off that way. Then she almost looks up to him. She looks this way and she says, yeah, but you never know. You understand the words? Yes, but you never know. And Bobby goes like that. And I say to Mother, well, here is your push one more time. Thank you. I feel an enormous sadness at that moment. I can feel it now. Can you feel that too? He was just beginning to yield and allow himself to be with her. And it was too uncomfortable for her. Yielding is about being vulnerable, is about being receptive. And that was the best she can do. I never said anything at that moment because it was implicitly understood. Do I have any more time or about? I have 7 minutes. I'm so proud of myself. I have set probably 6.5 now. Every movement has an affect that goes with it. You do not move without an affect. An affect is a feeling, it's a quality. Excuse me, like when I go like this, you have a certain quality. If you do it, you change the movement, it's a different quality. In integrating these movements into this family situation, I am looking to expand their movement repertoire, which means expanding their affective repertoire, which means expanding their emotional repertoire. So although these patterns you can see is diagnosis as well as treatment, because we can and they could diagnose what was going on with each other, and also feeling it through their whole body. It's that therapeutic contacting where it's also you're treating the situation. So in the pattern of yielding, I offered something different. Let's see if we can bring these other movements to use them as resources for contacting. We all use all these patterns all the time. From my coming up and saying hello to you, you didn't know, you should not have sat in this first row seat. To saying hello to you, or in simply adjusting to the light. There is always this yielding with, pushing against, reaching for, grasping onto and releasing in every moment of contacting. It's not a linear sequence, neither are the sequences of contacting linear, but it's like looking at a diamond. In this session, I was looking at the facet of yielding and pushing, but they were also reaching and grasping and pulling and releasing as well. But it's what comes foreground that interests me, what comes foreground that's repetitive. Because all these patterns are part of them, I forgot the end of the sentence. Oh well, we'll forget that sentence. Please notice that there's always a preposition in English. It's a yielding with, a pushing against, a reaching for. There is always in every pattern, in every movement, there is an implied other. The other is already there. I think that's all I have to say for the moment in a condensed way, and then we can talk about it. But did you have a sense of the session clearly enough? Okay. Then I give you my extra moments.
Thank you very much, Ruella, for, I think that was a real performance. I think you showed us in your embodied movements what you were talking about.
That's my first language. That's my first language.
I realized when I started talking to you and introducing the speakers to you, I omitted to say who I was. So I'll just briefly say who I am. I'm Christine Stevens, and I edit the British Gestalt Journal. I was asked to invite you to this panel because someone else who's also another expert working with children wasn't able to, Gordon Wheeler. And I don't consider myself to be an expert in working with children. I work with young people, but not exclusively with children, obviously work with families. So I didn't feel that it was appropriate for me to present, but I took on the challenge of chairing, and I felt that that would be really important, that to facilitate this dialogue between these very interesting approaches to the work. So I introduced Margherita to give her presentation now.
Thank you, Christine. And I want to say, first of all, that I hope that this thing works. Okay. I'm very happy to be here with Ruella and Christine. This is a dialogue I very much like and wanted to have with Ruella, because I like very much what she does, and I know that I do very different things, and so this exchange was important to me. But this is Ruella's paper, and I don't know. Okay, I don't find the paper. Okay, I don't find it. Probably it's gone. I really wanted to. Well, maybe I have papers. Maybe I can share this with you because I have copies. Thanks. So I share this. I distribute this. I can't speak without this. It's two each. So. You will have two papers.
2 pages, so take 2 pages and we give them to you.
2 papers, 2 flyers. I will speak to you, I will tell you how I see developmental aspects in the self of the person. And I start from the concept of figure and ground. So, to me, the developmental aspects are ground experiences, what we have learned from previous contacts. I published an article in the Gestalt Review in 2012 where I present this model, which is called the polyphonic development of domains. So I use the words of interjecting, projecting, etc. Like competences, like domains or contact making. So if I interject, I'm not doing a wrong thing. I'm doing a competence. I'm having a competence of interjecting. And I can learn to interject or project, etc. in a more or less anxious way. So if the mother, let's say, gives milk to the child in being anxious and the field is full anxiety, then the way the child will interject will be full of anxiety, and so on. So this is the concept of developmental, polyphonic, developmental of domain. Polyphonic because all these competences, interjecting, projecting, etc., which are individual competences of the child, intertwine. And so if I can interject in a certain way, and I can project in another way, I can retroflect in another way in each situation. And all these competences are all together, and they make like a music. So that's why polyphonic. When I move with another person, I can be more anxious about interjecting and less anxious about projecting or retroflecting. So all these competences adjust to the actual situation, and they make like a music we play with the other. This is about the ground experience. It's like the ground we walk on when we do contact. But these terms, interjecting, projecting, etc., which we don't like, because they are not phenomenological terms, they explain something that belongs to the individual, not something that belongs to the here and now of the contact making. The contact making is made of improvisation between two people. So we could not describe what happens between mother and child saying the child is interjecting. It's so poor. What we can describe is different, is the dance that they make together. A child cries and the mother comes very soon with a smile. This is the beginning of an experience. The experience of the child is crying and mother that comes with a smile. So the experience starts at the point when the other comes, when the other co-creates the experience. And I make it short because I thought a lot about this, and in this last summer I thought a lot about how can we describe the dance between the mother and the child, or caregivers and child. And that where the book on children came out, I tried to describe in phenomenological and aesthetic terms what happens between mother and child, or caregivers and child. So I came out with different terms, which are what you have in the second page. I call them dance steps. And it starts from the excitement, when the senses are excited by the other or an other, then we start to excite ourselves. So this is the first step. When mother and child see each other, they get alive, and they start something. It's as Ruella does. These steps are somehow, they describe the contact boundary, but not in a linear way. There are also competences for contact making, but you can have just one moment, like to intuit each other, to excite each other, or having fun together. So you don't have to have all the steps. You can also have one step. But this is what can happen, how we can describe what happens between mother and child. So first they intuit each other, then they excite each other, then they resonate, which is different. To resonate means I come out with my own individual and creativity and respond to you. So a mother can resonate with the cry of the child, smiling or being annoyed or being tense, etc. This resonating creates a field. For the child to cry means to cry and the mother who is bothered. So if we make a jump into the session, therapeutic session, what we feel as psychotherapists is the field. So when the client, for instance, cries, And we resonate with the client. And our aesthetic tool, our aesthetic feeling makes us feel that maybe we are annoyed, or we are. So we resonate with the field. I think this is a way to translate in more modern terms what Peirce said, stay with your senses, you know? But we need to make it more limited, not just less narcissistic, you know? Because before, if I feel this, like in the Peirce terms, if I feel this, I'm right. This was the boasting of the therapists in the 70s or 80s. Now we know that what we feel is part of a field, and it's resonating with the client as part of the field, but it's not the truth. So the other steps are to adjust to each other. To adjust to each other means to do the steps, the dancing steps, without what do you say? Kicking the other, without stepping on the other's toes. And then another step is to take bold steps together, to do a third thing, to do something out of the we, to do a third thing, a third reality. And that, in the little example I will give you, there is this bold step together. And then there is the having fun together. Mother and child have fun, and we also have fun with our clients, you know. So, and then there is the reaching the other, the feeling that what I wanted to tell is reached. I could reach to tell you what I wanted to tell or to do with you. And then there is the letting oneself go to the other, like this. So if you see a child that, for instance, throws something, a little child throws something from the high chair, throws a toy, he's playing with the gravity force. You know? So the mother can be annoyed. Just she's doing some other things. She picks the toy, she puts it on the high chair again, and she's annoyed. So, and the child doesn't feel recognized in his play, and learns how to seduce the mother, because the interest switches from the toys that falls down to the mother that is not very interested. And if the mother is interested and says, you want to throw the toy down, so I'm very glad of this, and I like how you do it, and she makes sounds, then the child can be completely in that playing. And he will feel stronger and more, he will feel recognized, better recognized. I want to give you, so this is what I did, and I made this grid, which is also a grid for research, because you can observe caregivers and child with this grid, and also you can ask the therapist, as a therapist or as a researcher, what you feel when you look at this interaction. So the feeling of the therapist or the researcher is important for us Gestalt therapists, because we use it. We use it as to resonate in the field. This is very short, and what I wanted to summarize for you what I did. And now I bring you an example, a clinical example. How much time? 10 minutes. We worked on this panel, the three of us, on Skype. And so we took a lot of attention to the minutes we used for theory, for clinical example. And now, like Ruella said before, I feel so relieved that I have 10 minutes. The clinical example is about a child that vomits in the morning, a 6 years old child. In the morning he has to go to school, and everything is very messy and very anxious, because the parents have to go to work. So they push the child to be quick, to have his breakfast and go to school. And they also don't go very well together. They fight because they accuse each other that they are not good with the child. I don't know the words, okay. And the child, what is the experience of the child? He feels some tension in the air. He doesn't know whether he is tense or father mothers are tense. Anyway, there is some tension. And he feels the tension in his diaphragm. So he focuses on his diaphragm. He's afraid to lose control. And he has also to drink the milk, and he's afraid to lose control. And the more he feels the tensions outside, the more he feels the tensions inside. And so he stiffens this control, and all of a sudden, he gets rid of this control and he vomits. The parents come to therapy because they are worried about this child that vomits in the morning before going to school. And the therapist, the Gestalt therapist, welcomes the three of them in the setting and looks at what happens among the three of them. And he listens at the story, what happens in the morning, and asks, what happens in the morning? How is the feeling in the morning? And they say, well, the feeling is pretty tense because we are in a hurry. We are worried about arriving late at work, and this child vomits, and we have to wait for him, and so on. And the therapist is focused on his or her own feeling. And addressing to this grid, she could mentalize what happens, saying that there is the tension, so they do resonate to each other. Because there is a tension in the child, tension in the parents, they do recognize their tension and they do resonate because they do different individual things, different things to each other. So they do resonate. And what is in the image of the therapist, there is something missing, like a breath, like doing like this. They don't breathe. And if the therapist lets the imagination go, she would imagine a smile like something, a third reality, like taking a bold step together. A smile is like, let's get rid of this tension, let's do something different. This is an ability of human relationships, to do something different when there is too much anxiety. And so the therapist thinks, what if these parents would smile to the child? And she asks to do this, and the parents are very touched by this. They say, this is what we want to do, to smile, because we love each other and we love the child, and we would like to smile. So when they try to smile, everything calms down. And they can have fun together, and who cares, maybe the child will go to school earlier because it doesn't feel pushed. It doesn't need to control everything. And the therapist could also work on the theme of controlling the situation. These parents have a problem with controlling, with containing the anxiety, maybe. So, and this is an example of how we can use the experience of parents and child, how we can use the experience of being together, of reaching each other and co-creating their contact, using different steps, the idea of different steps in co-creating their contact, and how we can support the steps and what they can do already. So the steps are positive. They don't express what they cannot do. Like introjecting, projecting is more negative, But the steps are positive, like having fun together, supporting each other, or reaching each other. It's phenomenological. They are phenomenological because they express some positive strength to the other. And so how we can support this? And I think this can be applied also to adults. because this child could grow up with this feeling of having to control tension in his stomach, and maybe when he's a father himself in his family, when he feels the tension, like the children fighting or the wife fighting, he could feel the need to go out from home, for instance, like vomiting, like releasing control. So we can use this also like let's say a metaphor, or a better a field reaction, a field sense when we see grown-up children, the adults. I leave it open because then I think it's nice to have a dialogue. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we're going to stand up here so that we can talk with each other and talk with you rather than sitting in a corner. So thank you very much, Ruella and Margherita, for your very succinct, focused presentations. Really interesting. And I was fascinated to listen and to notice similarities and differences. Very different, in some ways very different use of language about very similar phenomena. And I think what I would like to hear from each of you, if you like, is some responses. You've just spoken, so maybe Ruella, who had the benefit of sitting listening just now, I wonder whether you have any initial responses or thoughts from your perspective.
For me, first of all, I need to say something that I didn't say, that in my family, the family I spoke about, can I use your hand? That could you press me really? They were attempting to find each other at the contact boundary, but they really couldn't. They were putting too much effort in the finding and making of contact. Sometimes in a family, be very loose, I look for the other and nobody's there. So it's the absence of the presence of the contact boundary. But these, you could look at my family and say they were fighting together, but no, they kept trying to find each other with great desperation. And I thought, in terms of the push, instead of this push of the child coming out and saying what he wanted in the family, he pushed inward. And that was the control inside, that when you push inside instead of out, if you cannot meet the other here and feel yourself safe with the other, you cannot find that smile of the other, then you have to somehow support yourself. And I could see that finally the pushing of the vomit is some kind of release of that push. At least he was pushing somewhere. Something came out. So that was interesting to me. Oh.
Yeah, there are also your papers, we printed it. Oh. So maybe then you will have also Ruella's. I'm thinking which step could be this pushing, and you said they pushed and they could not recognize the other.
Differentiate themselves and merge with the other. Yielding, pushing does not separate.
Yes.
So in the contacting, I allow myself to be with and feel my difference.
But you don't.
I could not in this situation, either situation.
So they don't feel the other.
They don't kinesthetically resonate with the other. And in your teaching them how to kinesthetically resonate with the family, they are learning how to feel each other.
Yes. So I think in terms of my steps, they don't resonate with the other. It's like they don't give their contribution to the contact. Yes?
May I just, in the yielding pushing, that sets up a rhythm. And that's the rhythm of contacting. And to be able to resonate, you have to feel like the beginning of id function. You have to feel your body alive.
I just love the way, Ruella, as I listen to you, I have such a sense of embodied movement. The model, the metaphors you're using are very, very much to do with movement in the body. And we're talking about the same phenomena, but when I listen to you, Margherita, it seems you're talking much more about affect. Not only, but that's the way in the way I understand what you're saying. Does that make sense to you?
Emotional
feelings.
Yes, feelings, emotional, and I don't know how to say the whole self, the being fully there with the other, which is also movement. But also the wish, I think maybe a difference could be the wish to reach the other. I base very much my theory on this wish to reach the other. I'm sure it's also in your, but it makes maybe some, it's the basis of the concept. The child wants to reach the other, and also the parent wants to reach the child. So this wish to reach shapes the dance steps. They shape the dance steps because I want to dance with you. This is the point of the child who is born and of the parents who have their role of parents. I've always said that the children love parents more and better than the parents love the children, because I think they are fresher when they are born. They want to dance with their parents, but sometimes they're not there, and sometimes they are there with some anxiety. So what we do is to support this dance, to work and to reach each other.
We're having a good time having a discussion amongst ourselves, and I imagine that some of you are desperate to have a go and to join in. So this microphone we can send round. Please talk through the microphone, because I know it's really important for some people. They won't hear if you don't talk through the microphone. So I'm sorry about that restriction, but it is very enabling. So I hope we can just, if you put up your hand if you would like to join in, and then we'll pass the microphone between us. No, you stand there.
Okay. Always looking to move.
So I think, Marianne? And then on over there.
Thank you very much. Fascinating to listen to you. And I have worked with adults, not with children. So in a way, the adult brings the 6-year-old with the rhythm and the melodies, how this person moves. And I sometimes would say, as if I would meet two clients. The one who is reaching out, the child wants to reach me, and at the other side there's an adult who is very anxious to be exposed, to be shamed, and is doing this. I wanted to add that because I felt it fitted.
Yeah, there's always the ambivalence. I think we're always reaching all the time. Someone comes to therapy, they're reaching, but they're ambivalent. And you see that, you feel that in the field. You feel their desire. Maybe you see it in their eyes and holding back in their chest, so there's an inward push. But there's always the ambivalence.
Then how to bring it in, how to bring our resonance in, to respect both the child and the scared adult.
Yeah, I just want to add, when Margherita is talking about presence and being there with, when you find your own, as we did for 2 seconds this morning, that yielding in the chair and feeling your own push, the push of the floor coming up to support you, I always say to my students, don't make an intervention until you feel yourself in the chair.
Yes, also, I think that it's interesting how the client shapes the fear. Because this is, you resonate with this. I think they are always interwoven, you know, fear and hope. And the way the client shapes fear and hope is interesting, because that makes you resonate.
So I'm just thinking about the role of mirror neurons in the interactional dance between the parent and the child. It just struck me that the dynamics, field dynamics, has something to do with the role of mirror neurons that go on between the parent and child.
Yeah, I'm not a neuroscientist, so I'm not a mirror neuron person. I can appreciate that somebody studies the brain, but I think that we're born with this kinesthesia. It is our primary intelligence, and we lose it through inhibitions that develop over time. But I was saying in my thing with Jean-Marie that a 42-minute-old baby, if the researcher goes like this, over a matter of moments, the baby's going and finds his tongue. I don't know how sophisticated the mirror neurons are at that point, but I know the kinesthesia and the recognition of when you open your mouth, I feel mine opening, and I find my tongue in yours. So it makes sense to me that way, but I'm not a scientist.
I've been working with Daniel Stern for 9 years, and he was he brought the idea of dance, and of course we are very in line with him. And he used a lot the neuroscience, you know, the new results of neuroscience. He made me know the mirror neurons and the group of Parma that now I'm friend of, Vittorio Gallese, who discovered mirror neurons. And he also addressed to the synchronization that our neurons can have in their function. So he used to say, do you know why people who are in love and kiss each other don't break their teeth? Because there is this synchronization in our brain, capacity to synchronize. So I think that we can address very well to neuroscience.
I just wanted to say, Margherita, you mentioned something about need to reach out to the other. And I think it's very existential. It's about our existence. It's about finding ourselves only in the relationship to the other. Just that, really.
In front of you.
My question is to Ruella. When you're talking about the child and the anxiety of going to school, my question is immediately how much you support observing the relationship of the child and the mother, where obviously there is a really strong co-creation of what's happening. But at the same time, for me, the field is broader because the school can itself be a factor in what we see over there.
As they work things out, as they work things out over time, he changed schools. But for the mother to listen to him, that it was the school, because it was a very high-class private school in New York, and if you went and graduated from this school, you could go to Harvard. So he was trying to say no, and they wouldn't hear him. So he was saying no, trying to differentiate himself in many different ways. But first we had to start with can you feel me with you? And that took a while. And I have to say this was not a success story, because when he changed schools, they left therapy. It's too bad, but maybe it was one of my failures.
I also have a question for you, Ruella, because I understand that you are putting a spotlight on a child in the mother-child relationship. And I've got a question, if that how mother works with the child also is a reflection of her experience of her own caregiver.
Absolutely. This is the passage of intergenerational trauma, and you could see it. She could not see who he was. She saw the person she needed him to be, because if he were not that person, she would be re-traumatized. She cannot see her reflection in him or who she wants him to be. Then let's say, if you're not who I want you to be, I didn't do a good enough job mothering. I wasn't a good enough child. Passed down. That's very brief, but that is the passage of intergenerational trauma. And you see how it's passed to him, and he feels it in the same way. Now, had she had another child who didn't have the same kind of movement style, she might have been influenced in a different way. But here, there's not the irritation of differentiation. There's not enough difference between their styles, and their styles are being enhanced. So the repertoire is being very limited.
These are all fascinating movements and experiences. At the same time, I was thinking, we're talking about a very traditional family, mother, father, and child. And I think in 2016, we have to look at different family relationships. So I think we need some more research on those, just to give that, because it sounds so traditional, and I'm missing something about modern families.
I have a father I work with who is a single father and had a child with a donor, egg donor, and so that's my one non-traditional family.
Okay.
But I have one.
So you need some more.
I need some more, so if you want to send them.
Any volunteers?
Thank you very much for that. For that contribution.
Yes.
But did you hear apart from the context presented in the vignettes?
Yes.
What about the theory? Do you think there's something different needed in the theory?
I'm not sure. I think that's what we need to look at some more. We need to discover more. So.
So does someone else, this is really important. Does anyone else here have experience, clinical experience, or comments? Because it's very interesting to know how kind of culture bound, how does this only is the idea of social stereotypes?
Yes.
Is the theory bound within that, or is it loose from that? I think that's
we maybe
important.
Need to
think
expand
through.
a little bit.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nice to hear. Nice to hear.
Thank you. Am I not doing my job properly? You want to say? Yes.
Yes, but I liked your question to the audience. I'm sure that there are people in here who could say something. What I can tell, Dick, is that to me it's absolutely the same thing. And there are researchers about the effects of being children of homosexual parents, etc. And you know that there is no difference unless maybe they are more social, no? Maybe.
Maybe. That's interesting.
I think we know that. So I present the vignette in a traditional way, but to me, just because we work on the process of being together, our model applies very well to any kind of family. So maybe with, yeah.
Well, except of course that each family constructed family would bring out would dance in a different way. You know, the dance would be unique to the configuration, and that's Dick's point, which I think is really important and perhaps highlights the fact that we don't know. You know, and that's important. Yeah, I think it's a really, really useful interject. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you both, Ruella and Margherita. I really like this, Margherita. I want to say thank you. And could you say something more about what you call the risks? The risks when the contact boundary is desensitized? Could you say something more about
risk? Yes. The risk. The risk is when the contact boundary is desensitized.
Because you have a problem here in the contact boundary is
desensitized. It's to intuit each other. The risk when the contact boundary is desensitized is the confluence and confusion and madness. And when to perceive each other is the function. When this function is perceived in an anxious way, then the risk, it's impossible to perceive the other. The need to control the diversity of the other takes over the field. Maybe the example that Ruella was doing about not finding the other, not resonating, to recognize each other and to recognize the intentional resonance of the other. This is the point of Ruella's case. So this mother did not recognize the intentional resonance of the other, what the child wanted to do. And so I don't know, then you can say, and so the response was not to be present at the contact boundary. Or at least in my case, maybe it's better if I take my case, the mother-child and the mother-father-child, they did not take bold steps together. And so the risk is to project paranoid experience and boredom. So they were projecting on this child that he did not want to go to school or things like that. So when there is the inability to take bold steps together means let's solve the problem in another way. Let's go out from the schema and solve the problem in another way with a smile. And when they cannot do this on account of the anxiety, then that is the risk. And the positive, instead, the positive attitude is courage, agency, capacity.
But most, Margherita, it's mostly true, isn't it, that the clients that we're seeing in therapy are the families where the dance isn't working, where the aesthetic of the dance is halting and stumbling. So when you write about risk, I mean, those are the people we're seeing.
Yes.
That's right, isn't it? Yeah. Yes. Marianne. Julia. Sorry. Julia.
I just wanted to say something. I just wanted to say something to you, Dick. Like you, Christine, I find that important. And now, when I sat here, it hit me that I've worked with some adults who lost a father or a mother as a baby. Yes. But I hadn't realized just now through your comment and how we worked, what that meant for their bodily rhythm or melody. It's a bit like tones missing, or a reaching, or a longing, I would say it, for the other tone, for the male and the female. It just came to me. Thanks for that.
I don't need to respond, so...
No, I just want to just throw it. Oh, no.
Does anyone else want the microphone? Alessio. Alessio, and then
Let's pick it.
Hello. So I got a few thoughts about what you said, and it's following on from the non-traditional families, actually. I work a lot with the LGBT community, and what you said, Ruella, about the... Oh, can you hear me now? I work a lot with the LGBT community, and what you said, Ruella, about the embodiment and the trauma that can be inherited in a homophobic field, how that really... How I see that in adult clients, and how that at some point in the development, usually you have a father or a mother who doesn't really stay with the experience of a homosexual child, or... Sorry, I'm very anxious. This is very close to me, and I work also with asylum seekers who are in the UK, and they're seeking asylum based on an LGBT basis, and they've lost their families, so they've lost that other who wants to stay with. So it's very powerful, and I hope this will be developed for adults as well, rather than children, because it really applies to any age. So that's my thoughts.
You know, if we look at the push as a movement of the field, but also as lived in the body of the client, the patient, the person you work with, that inward push gives me a support. It makes me certain, because I'm not certain that I can find you. So I need to be certain. So when our clients come in and they're holding themselves in particular configurations, we see the history as it's lived in this moment. The history constitutes and is constituted by this present moment. When Margherita says the smile, those parents, there's a shift in the whole embodied experience as you bring in yielding. In that kind of development that you're talking about, there's not a lot of allowing to be with another, and you cannot be with yourself. And it goes like this, you know?
And I notice a specific way of holding themselves of the LGBT community, and I keep on thinking, why do we hold ourselves so similarly?
Can you show me, us?
It's usually something about a very stiffness in the shoulders. I notice that in myself and other people, and I always wonder, has that something to do with having to hold myself? Or being someone else?
Yeah. Sure.
Can I lose in myself? Can I make my family, my mother, see the way I really move?
Yeah, that's really interesting. You're going to be holding in your pelvis too. But I just want to say that holding, as Laura says, is a support, is an assistance for something else. So I don't want to take away their push. I want them to understand and know the meaning of their push as it expresses in this moment. The meaning of my holding, I am experiencing the other as part of me. That wasn't well said, but you know what I mean.
And the risk that if I let go, the other will disappear, because they will...
Or take me over.
Me. Yeah.
That's the thing. You won't be there, or you'll leave me, or you'll overwhelm me.
Thank you.
It's very important what we are saying here is the role of the therapist as a resonating role, because if you push, what does the other feel? So the resonance, also the emotional resonance of the therapist is important also in your model for you. It's basic, because basing on what you feel, you set an intervention, a different intervention. So I think we are all referring to the concept of field somehow.
You don't exist without pushing. You don't exist without pushing, and there is always a pushback.
Hopefully.
No. There is always a pushback. It may not be a satisfying push or a fluid push or a push that enlivens you or animates you, but there is always a push back.
Otherwise, it's not a push.
Otherwise, you don't exist. You don't exist without the pushing and the pushing back. I is another.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've got a question from Elizabeth.
My question concerns adoption. I have a client who was adopted. If you have a mother that doesn't resonate with you, receive you, and you're adopted fairly early, is that stay, or if they're adopted into a good family that does then actually engage properly, is there a resonance that lasts from the original? Does any research, you know anything of this, either of you?
You want?
No.
I don't think there is a proper way to be a parent. I think there's a way to feel oneself as a parent and to feel fully in this role and also in the body of a parent. So I think that in the adoption, what is missing is the confidence to feel that one can be a parent, even if there is not the real giving birth and the biological connection. So I think that many parents who have adopted children are not supported enough to feel their body at the presence of the children. They are guilty. They feel guilty that they did not give birth to their children. Of course, it's more difficult because they miss one part of being together. But they could do much better, the parents, if they could trust their body and their feeling and their wish to be good parents.
And that would overcome the initial, original rejection by the original mother. Yes, yeah.
I don't know what this means yet because I just learned this. But the amniotic fluid has the same smell as the mother's breast milk that's ready to come out. So what the baby does when it is born, it smells the amniotic fluid on its hand and it searches for the breast. I just learned that, so I have to really think about it, but isn't that amazing? Yeah. So, if you're given at birth to a mother and you don't have that smell originally, I don't know what that means yet, but it's interesting. And I agree with Margherita as well.
Yes.
That adoptive parents absolutely need more support.
Yeah. Thank you.
So we've got 5 minutes, so there's time for another question, and then I'm going to ask each of you, Margherita and Ruella, maybe just to say some final thoughts.
Sorry. Yes. I was touched in both your clinical examples. There were laughing episodes between children and the parent. And it seems that joyness and laughness and playful is the way to support family, to be together, to reach each other.
Just a comment?
Yes.
Thank you. Would you like to say some final thoughts of the experience?
Ruella, I've been waiting for this moment since many years. Now, but I like your model very much, and I support my students to train with you also. And apart this confluential part with you, I would like to say something more precise about how our different glances can combine together. And I think they can. I think that we both support the positive, the movement, and maybe a difference is that I try to support the physiological breathing and the physiological relaxation in the contact making, and I support a lot this wish to reach the other. Maybe one question I could put to you: do you also believe that the people who are in contact, mother and child, first of all, they have this wish for contact?
Yes. And I just answer simply by the baby floating in the fluids of the amniotic fluid is always supported by another. And then it feels the womb and then pushes off the womb. So we're always, when you're born, when the baby comes out, they're always looking for that push that was already there. So yes. And
what you're saying, we are a whole at the beginning. The baby is in a hole with the environment. So the mother or whoever, the caregiver, is the environment supporting the movements and the being with.
Yes. And we're always looking for that yielding and pushing against another. Thank you so much, because you know I wouldn't be on a panel if you didn't push me a little bit. So I thank you for the pushes, even though when you push I go, oh my God. So I thank you, and I have a lot of respect for you, so it's been a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for saving us when Gordon dropped out. I really appreciate everything you said and how you brought this together. Okay, we're having a love fest. Excuse us.
Make sure you get one of Ruella's handouts before you leave. We'll have them on the door. Thank you very much, everyone.